The thing is, I think sometimes people forget there are real people at the end of these transactions that have a lot at stake. And I think that gets forgotten about quite a lot.
I remember when we were at Reading University I was doing my MSc in real estate, and we did a valuation module. And on one of the slides for the lecture, it literally said valuers are spivs. And I was like, and I never had any desire to be able to work in valuation, to be fair. But I just thought, why? I was like, why would someone say that? And then you look back and you go, I can kind of understand why people get frustrated with valuers. Like they just don't help themselves. Welcome to the Property Funder podcast. I'm here with Adam Stiles. Adam is back. He's back for the second time. We managed to make him look like a hostage in an ISIS video with the grainy footage on a Teams recording. You were, I think, our first.
I was your first guest,
official guest.
That
at
was
least.
Late 2022.
Oh my God, is it that long?
Yeah, you've had a few guests since then.
Had a few guests. I think we've released 75, 76
Wow.
episodes since then. So yeah, a lot of water under the bridge, but wanted to have you back. We had an opportunity to do that, and you jumped at the chance. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you. Thanks for having me back.
No, it's good to have you back. Adam, if people don't know who you are, if we can just remind people who you are and where you're from.
I'll give you the 10-second spiel. So I'm Adam Stiles. I'm the Managing Director of Helix Financial Partners, which specialises in residential and buy-to-let mortgages, as well as protection, so life cover, income protection and critical illness, and also business protection, and Helix Structured Finance, which does bridging development commercial finance. And that is it in 10 seconds.
That's it in 10 seconds. That's pretty good. So should we wrap things up and leave it there? We're done. Okay. Right, let's go to the pub. Joking aside, late 22 when you came on, obviously that was an interesting time. How has the business evolved and changed since then?
Well, I suppose that's two questions, because it's the market as well. In terms of a business, though, at the time when I was here last, there were three of us. So it was myself, my business partner, David Turner, and our admin manager, Kerry Clark. And that was right after the trust budget. But since then, we're up to 9 people. So we've got a marketing manager, 2 admin, and how many does that leave us? 6 brokers, including myself and David.
Nice.
So we've grown quite a lot. It's been a hell of a ride, just with the market and also growing a business. We've never run a business before, so that's come with its challenges and its ups and downs. But we are where we are now.
And how have things adapted in terms of you yourself? You and David processing cases and leads versus I guess it's that kind of, are you still on the tools, or are you off the tools and kind of working on the business rather than in the business?
We're certainly doing a lot more on the business. We engaged with a business coach. It was like group coaching, a company called Action Coach, led by a guy called Parag and his team, Cooks and Margarita, and that was kind of group coaching, and that really changed our mindset from working in the business to on the business, and from that we've certainly taken a step back on the volume that we get involved with, and now that we've got a team, we can pass out a lot more business. So we've kind of, our first employee, broker-wise, took on a lot of our own client bank. So that might be the smaller ones, the more complex ones, sometimes even just the easy ones. So where David and I get more involved is the larger stuff or the more complex stuff. I pretty much do all of the bridging development commercial. Some of the guys are dipping their toe more in that market because it's such a great opportunity. And I feel that if you're going to be a broker, you should be on at least nodding terms with every type of property finance, just to give your client the best possible advice.
No, that's great. And how have you seen how's the spread of products evolved since we last spoke over sort of 2.5 years ago now?
Well, I suppose the most immediate one in the most recent weeks have been 100% mortgages. So people like April and Gable. There's been more support, more innovation in certainly the first-time buyer market in terms of deposit-led schemes and the types of property they can lend on. So, for instance, new build flats have always been quite hard to get the leverage on, but that's eased. The government's obviously come out with more pressure to ease stress tests, because those stress tests came in on a margin over base, and obviously as base shot up, it was harder to get the level of mortgage that you would like. So there's been pressure to ease that commensurate with where the rates are now, which increases people's borrowing power.
Yeah, and in terms of the types of business that you're doing, is it in terms of acquisition versus refinances, for example? Presumably, 2023 there was a lot of refinances, a lot of bridges, a lot of bridging buy-to-let.
Yeah, the bridging market did very well then, and I think they continue to do so. Yeah. But we're seeing more acquisitions. We're nowhere near the levels we were in days gone by. But so most of our book is refinance. Yeah. But there are people that see opportunities in the market and they're taking advantage of that. And
are you seeing developer appetite coming back? I suppose. And what about buy-to-lets? Is buy-to-let is dead, or long live buy-to-let?
No, but buy-to-let will always be around because there's always a market for people wanting to rent property. In fact, that demand is so huge that rent has obviously gone up quite a lot. So there will always be an opportunity there for people. I don't think you'll earn the same sort of profits that you once did because of how you're taxed on that personal name. There's certainly more people doing it in limited company name. It's becoming more of a professional asset class. Yeah. I think a lot of the inherited and accidental landlords are kind of falling away because if you inherit it, it's usually in personal name. And if you're a high rate taxpayer, you're not going to be making much of that. You might make some capital growth if you're in the south, but apart from that, there's it's more headache than it's worth. But it's becoming
regulatory changes have obviously been a big problem for buy-to-lets, haven't they?
And developers, we're definitely seeing more opportunities there. Certainly, if rates have dropped quite a lot in the last 2 years, so the finance side has eased. Mm-hmm. The supply chain is still somewhat of a mess. Planning, of course, is that hot potato. Keir Starmer coming out and say, just get on with it or we'll, fine you or whatever is just incredible. Considering most bottlenecks are on the government side with all the pre-commencement conditions and all the bits that they have to do. What a balmy thing to say. If someone's going to build to make profit and they can't, they're not going to build. So you're going to force someone to do something that they otherwise would have done if the opportunity was there to do it.
Yeah, I do think it always makes me laugh how the government just thinks just get on and build. Yeah. Just go and do just fucking do it.
Why not look in the mirror and think, well, actually, maybe we can help these people more rather than just go and do it.
Well, I think that's the other side of it. The other side of the coin is if you ever are, the last place you should ever look for inspiration to actually get things done, get results is the public sector. No, so
they need to get their house in order first before pointing fingers elsewhere.
Did you see the announcement a few days ago? I don't know if it was music to my ears or not, but the government basically saying if you've got if you leave a development part complete for a certain period of time, we'll take it away. There was a part of me that goes, do you know what? We specialise in funding.
Great for you guys, isn't it?
We specialise in funding part of complete development. So, this is more opportunities for us. Yeah. On the other hand, there's a reason why those developments ended up being part complete.
Exactly.
And let me be honest. I think Allsops or your favourite receivership company is probably far better placed to deal with a part complete development site than the government. Imagine the government. If you could imagine the sheer volume of waste and inefficiency that will be applied to getting that development back on its feet.
In the public
you ain't
purse
seen
as well.
nothing.
Takes a hit.
You ain't seen nothing yet.
Yeah.
Well, I think, the thing is, when it comes to government, and God, I don't want to, I think, let's not spend too much time talking about government, because I think everyone get bored and just, so it's just too easy to bash them, isn't it? But I think the thing about government, like, we obviously have a government that is, and by the way, this applies to most governments of the last 40, 50 years, right? Governments that are incredibly wasteful when it comes to the public's money. But the biggest issue is the people, right? Is that you've got people who are not, that there's no productivity targets, and they're not incentivized to be productive. One of the biggest issues in the planning system, frankly, is that okay, there's a resource issue in terms of there's not enough money in the planning system, but actually one of the bigger issue is that the planners themselves, the planning officers themselves, their incentives are all wrong. Mm. There's not, like, how about we say how about actually we get planning officers who've got some degree of financial incentive or other incentive. I mean, maybe, we want to maybe eliminate the temptation for large volume house builders to put brown envelopes under their noses. But I mean, who's to say that doesn't happen, by the way? But actually create some incentive for planning officers to be more efficient, as one example, right? And I don't know, like, let's not start the Doge conversation, but anyway, but yeah, so appetite from your developer clients, is it getting a bit better? Land values a little bit more realistic, or is it still sticky?
It's getting better. It's still sticky. It's definitely not what it was, but there was probably 2 years where nothing was really happening, but we're having more conversations. Yeah, which is where it starts, right?
Yeah, no, exactly. And what are they saying on the ground? Like, what are some of the anecdotes you've picked up over the last 3 or 4 months? As you've been talking to some of your developer clients who maybe have been in hibernation mode for the last couple of years.
It's a split between the planning issues and the vendors, because you've got these vendors who think, I've got a plot of land, it's got planning on it, must be worth millions. And to a lot of people, that's potentially their pension or something they've been relying on later in life. But we're past that cycle of the peak of what a vendor can get. And I think more and more landowners are realizing that they're not going to get a pretty penny for their land anymore. So they either wait for the cycle to go back round or they sell at a sensible price. And that cycle could be another 10 years. And a lot of these landowners don't have 10 years. They don't want to wait 10 years.
No.
So they have to be more realistic.
Why would you? And have you seen many kind of interesting deal structures between landowners and developers? Yeah,
it's my favourite one is the JV with the landowner, because effectively the equity comes from the land. The landowner sees some upside from the development, and the developer, if it's structured correctly and the numbers work, doesn't have to put that much in. Obviously, they're still the full suite of security, but that makes a lot more sites viable, because that developer's not having to find loads of equity to investors to put in, and the margins tend to be better. There's no stamp duty to pay. There's not necessarily some day one money as well, so there's less interest on the finance. So that's definitely a more workable solution to a lot of opportunities.
And that's definitely something that we're seeing more and more of. And that's either structured by way of a third-party legal charge over the title, some sort of development agreement, or sometimes the landowner will sell the site, but they'll put in the deferred consideration is secured by way of a second-ranking legal charge or some other form of security. Yeah. Have you seen many developer clients try to save a few quid in stamp duty by doing buying the shares of the SPVs that the properties are held in?
That's actually not come up much, and the more they kind of pick away at that with their lawyers, they kind of get put off with it. It gets a bit overcomplicated.
What would you say to someone who's considering saving 20 grand in stamp duty on a £1 million land purchase where by buying the shares rather than buying the asset?
I mean, look, unless it's very clear cut and easy, just bite the bullet, because that will come back and bite you in the ass if you're not careful.
Yeah. Well, I mean, there's always that risk of residual liabilities in the company that you're buying, right? I think a lot of the time, you know, if you're a property developer, you develop property, you buy land, you develop it, you sell it, right? You're not an M&A expert, right? You're not a mergers and acquisitions expert when it comes to companies. And the problem is that the due diligence that's required for that for those types of purchase it's just a higher bar, because you're not just, you know, when you transfer the land, you know, you're just buying the land and whatever's on the title, right, and all the covenants and obligations that come with that. When you buy the company, there's all sorts of that you don't know about,
especially if the property's built.
Yeah,
because you've got all the liabilities that come for the first 10 years, right?
Yeah, well, there's that, but I think there's also like, well, what other contracts, you know, like what other contracts and things did the vendor of that company,
yeah, exactly,
sign themselves up for?
And smaller
right?
companies aren't that sophisticated, so to unpick that's a lot harder.
And we're not talking about like a Microsoft subscription, right? That, you know, we're talking about some serious stuff.
Yeah.
And you know, so we had an inquiry come in 2 days ago. Developer's got like, he's got like a bag of crisps and an Audi A4 for his A&L, and experience is okay, but you're like, if you're that experienced, why have you got no money? And then you look at the scheme and go, yeah, it's all right. It's sort of it's holiday-ish cottage territory, but it's flats. You probably get out on a rental. Yeah, all right, okay, you're just about okay there. And then he goes, yeah, but we want to do a share purchase.
Oh boy.
And you go, okay. And he's already a director of the company.
Right.
And the owner of the company, owner of the shares in the company, he's born in like 1937. So guess how old his solicitor's going to be. I don't know if you've ever had this, but he's probably
purely paper-based.
Paper-based,
yeah.
Right? Like, I took one look at Harry when we were looking at the deal in Heads of Terms. I said, this is going to be a show in underwriting. This is like, I said, just no.
Easier to say no.
Just no.
Yeah, there's better opportunities out there.
This deal's going nowhere. Yeah, so it's funny that, yeah, you save a few, like the JV structure's all well and good, but yeah, just do not, please, unless it's like, I reckon, what do you reckon what's the threshold for doing an SPV purchase where actually it could probably work? I don't know. In my mind, it's probably about £5 million. Like, it needs to be 5 million and above.
It needs to be sophisticated.
Yeah. Well, you've got to be able to justify like a proper set of solicitors on both sides of the table.
But also the client as well. They need to be sophisticated, because they need to go in with their eyes wide open.
Well, in some ways, it's not even the client. It's probably just as important. The client's one thing, but actually, you need a vendor who's got good records and who's got a decent accountant because effectively, I think if you've never done a corporate transaction, what happens is on the day of, and I've been involved in a few as I suppose as principal, but also we've done a few lens on corporate transactions over the years with Avamore. But what people don't realise is on the day of completion, you're the accountant that's acting. You've got accountants on both sides who effectively prepare a set of completion accounts, right? So who are effectively giving you warranties for what's in there, and obviously those accountants need to be decent people that you can trust. Yeah. So you can be like, right, and the two accountants have to agree on, generally speaking, on what's what on the positions when things are going, and all the disclosures, all that. I said good stuff, but none of that good stuff. So you need, like, you're right. You need to have that level of sophistication that makes it worthwhile, that makes it right. Otherwise, it's just going to be a nightmare. It's going to be a disaster. We actually we did all the DD on a corporate transaction in the autumn of last year. Poor Ed Blundell. He did all the work. And then like we're like, right, cool, we're ready to go. And the client had basically done all this work because they thought in the autumn statement there was, from the first, like obviously kind of first budgetary event by Labour, they were obviously showing themselves that there was going to be some like nasty crap in there for them. So they asked us to do all this work on a corporate transaction in the anticipation of some nasty shit that was going to come out in the autumn statement. When the autumn statement was released, I guess the worst fears were not realised, and therefore I think the client was like, "Oh yeah, we don't need to do that now." So and so like we'd done all this work for nothing, and then the clients went, "Yeah, we don't need."
It's often the way. So you're lucky if they've even acknowledged your work, or
totally.
Or they just disappear.
It's a bit like valuers, isn't it? You know, like the value just goes. You know, there must be some. I think we need to dig out some good memes that we should apply to valuers. It's basically like, you know, so like walking away from like a burning building, and like you can have a smile on their face. I mean, that's basically value. I mean, you told me a few months ago about, was it you had the client thought it was worth 10. You need to tell the viewers and listeners the numbers, but like it was valued at 10 or something. It's like a prime central London asset. They thought it was 10, and it was like came out at 1.
It'd been exchanged. It's in prime central London. It was a 5-story office building, freehold, and I was representing the vendor. They were in a nasty bridge. We need to refinance them quickly because they were running default interest, and the lender was just making up numbers. So we needed to refinance them whilst this buyer was going through the legal process. And they'd already exchanged at 4.8, and the valuer went in and came back and said it was worth 2.4, which is incredible because obviously one of the great sayings of valuers will say is it's only worth what someone's willing to pay for it. I don't know how much more someone can do to say that they're willing to pay for it post, except they'd already parted with the best part of £500,000.
Yeah, on exchange monies, right? So
yeah,
it's just ludicrous, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know what is? You know the meme I'm thinking about is it's the Joker in the Dark Knight movie. You know how he's shaking shaking the clicker outside the hospital, and he's dressed in the nurse's uniform. And his clicker goes, and he's walking, and his suddenly just goes bang. That's it. That's basically valuers in like 2024 and 2025.
Yeah,
right?
I think the frustration is, and I have a real frustration with the valuation of industry with property is they're quite willing to throw out fees and throw any valuer at it because they've got availability. And they feel that that's what's needed. And yes, there's always an element of speed, but at the same time, speed's irrelevant if that value doesn't come in where it needs to be. And obviously it needs to be sensible, but usually a valuer will know very quickly whether you're going to be anywhere near that figure. And they're happy to take the fee, and they'll promise, a 10-day SLA, and then you're 4 weeks in still waiting for it. And guess what? Comes back way under value on something they knew, and probably a few hours of instruction. So something needs to happen there, and there are some really good advocates in the valuation industry, and there's some fantastic valuers out there. I'm not saying that they're all bad. I just think there's a better way of doing it, and I can say names on here, can't I?
Yeah, go on.
I think Project & Co have got a really good approach to how they look at properties, which is you can have a conversation before the instruction to say, look, we think it's probably going to be about there. Is it worth us getting a quote from you? And if it's a no, fine. But at least we know that there's some questions around the value that we can talk to the client about without them having to spend thousands of pounds and weeks to get a no or something that's unviable. It's almost like when you do a residential mortgage and you get a decision in principle. I think there should be more of that in the valuation industry, because it also goes, there's some goodwill with valuers where you know that they're going to be sensible about it. They're going to have conversations with you and the borrower, rather than this kind of Chinese wall of not going to have any conversation. We're going to go in, we're going to ruin your deal, not even have a conversation about it. Thank you very much for the $5,000 or whatever it might be. I think there needs to be more upfront conversations on whether something is even in the right ballpark before people part with thousands of pounds, waste weeks. And don't forget, it's not just the monetary and the time, it's the stress, the anxiety, the sleepless nights for a lot of people in that chain, the broker, the lender as well, but more importantly, the client. It's just setting your stall out quicker.
Yeah, there's that element, I completely agree with you. Right now, it feels to me like the only people getting paid in a lot of transactions is the professionals. No, we as the lender, we don't make a penny until the loan is advanced. Yeah. You as the broker, exactly the same. And the client, if the money doesn't get advanced, the client's stuck, right? They can't, they can't do the project. If a client's a developer, he wants to get on and buy the thing and build it, right? I have to say, definitely in my mind, the valuers are the first in line for my ire at the moment. I think that to the extent that we used to say internally, look, we'll let the valuation do the work, right? As in, if we felt that a borrower's estimates were too aggressive, we'd go, right, we'll let the valuation do the work. It's fine. Now we have to almost go in the opposite direction, which is that values are being so conservative that we're having to curate our panel to the extent that we have to work with people. I mean, look, like you mentioned, Projects & Co. For our funding panels, we can't work with them at the moment because these Projects & Co. aren't approved on one of our funders panels, but it's people like that, people who are pragmatic, that we want to work with. And, certainly I'm all ears. We're very open to having more conversations with valuers who want to be pragmatic, who are going to have that initial, right, well, let's have a look at, before they even accept a penny. And I know I've seen Colin talk about this on social media, and I do like his transparency. I appreciate Colin Horton, who is the sort of one of the directors of Project & Co. He's not for everyone because he's Essex boy, tan, muscles, all the sports car, the white teeth. That doesn't do it for everyone. And he is posting about 6 times a day on LinkedIn. And I appreciate that may drive some people up the wall, but he does make some very good points, which is that he would rather not accept 5 or 10 grand or whatever it's going to make on an evaluation instruction, and actually be objective with the lender or the client and go, look, I don't think the numbers are going to come out. I don't want to take your money.
Well, exactly. You've got the thing is, I think sometimes people forget there are real people at the end of these transactions that have a lot at stake, and I think that gets forgotten about quite a lot. I mean, I know we were working on a deal together last year.
Was that the big one?
Yeah.
Yeah. And that the value would just... Yeah.
Well, actually, I think you're talking about the one the previous year.
Oh, yeah.
But the one more recently, in about six months ago, whenever it was.
You were taking us out, the one you were taking us out.
Yeah, I was taking you out of it. And it was 2 houses. I think we estimated it was going to be 3 million for the 2 houses. And one valuer went in 1.7. And obviously that made the whole deal completely unviable. It was also crazy because he'd not even valued the numbers that the lender that we were taking out with had asked for, and wouldn't even have a conversation about those numbers, even though that's what was basically being paid for. So we sent in another valuer with another lender. 2 weeks later, came in at 2.8.
Yeah, I mean it's just maddening, isn't it? And I was an RSCS member for many years. I never needed to, really, in my entire career, I needed to be an RSCS member for about a year and a half. As soon as I left commercial agency, I didn't need it. And for the life of me, I don't know why I kept my letters going. But honestly, I remember when we were at Reading University I was doing my MSc in real estate, and we did a valuation module. and on one of the slides for the lecture, it literally said valuers are spivs, and I was like, and I never had any desire to be able to work in valuation, to be fair, but I just thought, why? I was like, why would someone say that? And then you look back and you go, I can kind of understand why people get frustrated with valuers. Like they just don't help themselves. And
I don't look. There are some incredible valuers out there. I don't think that we're bashing everyone, but there just needs to be more pragmatism, more transparency, and just remembering there is that person at the end of it.
Yeah, I completely agree. Valuers, it is now safe to come out from behind the sofa.
Watch how all of our deals suddenly get down for the next 6 months.
Look, I think it's time to say something positive about some of the valuers that we've called in some of our, some of the well-known names that cover the specialist finance industry. We called them into the office. We've had conversations with them. We've basically said, look, you need to be more pragmatic. We have been able to have sensible conversations with them about the numbers that they've come up with. They have been accommodating at times. Where they've not been accommodating, they have provided justification for why they feel their position is right, and
which is fair enough.
Yeah.
But if you're not listening to anything else that's thrown in, which is compelling, that I get it. It's your professional opinion, but there needs to be a conversation if there's compelling evidence that goes against what you're saying, because you can't be in a situation where, like that example I gave, one valuer thinks it's 1.7, then 2 weeks later it's 2.8. That's mad. But also the owners of the valuation firms need to make sure that the right valuer is valuing the right asset with the skill set of that valuer and the knowledge of that valuer. I think far too often they're quick to take the fee and send anyone who's available out. And actually, you're not building goodwill with anyone. No. You're not building goodwill with the lender, the client, or the broker. The lender can give you a lot of business, so can the broker. And there's now, we almost have a black book of valuers. We will never let anywhere near any of our deals on the back of their behaviour on some of the others. And guess what? That's a lot of money that they've thrown down the pan because they didn't take half an hour to think, well, hold on, are we sending the right valuer? And actually, have we looked at this report properly? Are we listening to what's been said by the lender and the broker? Look, we are not valuers. But there are sometimes circumstances where, to any sensible person, the evidence that's been put forward should be incorporated in the report, or at least considered.
Yeah, I think the other thing to consider is that valuers have got, they've got now established under case law anywhere between 10 and 20% of buffer headroom in the figures that they present, meaning that they can be, they can be anywhere between 10 and 20% overvaluing and not get sued. Mm. So, that's why I think that there is that, they've already got a degree of protection baked into the cake. Why can't they be a bit more accommodating? Why can't they be a bit more accommodating as a consequence of that, on the basis that they've already got a bit of protection if they've gone a little bit too hot? Mm. We'll see. I mean, I guess. Let's turn our guns. Let's turn the guns to the lawyers now.
I knew that was coming. I would just say with lawyers, and it was Scott Apps actually at HTB who said, if you're going to spend money on a lawyer and you're going to try and penny pinch anywhere in the process, don't do it on your lawyer. Do not penny pinch on your lawyer
at the client level. Yeah, I mean, where what are you seeing more broadly from the legal profession? Because I'm going to tell you that. We have seen a massive drop-off in the performance levels of our lawyers definitely since COVID times. Obviously, with Means Ahead taking a step back from the business, now being more back involved on a day-to-day basis, is a marked decrease in service levels from our legal panel compared to before the pandemic, where fees have gone up. I've definitely noticed that fees have gone up, and and the service levels have gone down to the extent that if you ask, we're supposed to be the specialist finance industry, right? Short-term lenders, what's when I say short-term lender to you or bridge lender, Adam, what's the first word that should come to mind? Speed. Yeah. In speed, right? So then when you say to your lawyer, oh yeah, the client needs to complete in a week, right? The lawyer shouldn't turn around and go, okay, well in that case the fee's double. Sorry, but to quote my Scottish family, get to right. That is just ridiculous, but we're routinely seeing that now, where or we had one firm of solicitors. They do a lot of work for us, and they know I've been unhappy about this, but I'm not gonna name them, but they know who they are. They work with us, but they also work with a number of our peers and some of our larger peers, right? So when things get busy for our larger peers, we become like the red-headed stepchild. And so we had one situation in February where we had, I think, 6 deals that were due to complete within a fortnight at this point. And on a Thursday afternoon, Ed gets an email going, yeah, we're not gonna be able to work on this and this until next week because we've got to work on other people's completions. Ooh, indeed. So then effectively you're going from Thursday night to like Monday afternoon where our lawyer's not touched a case.
Twiddling your thumbs.
Yeah, so I'm sorry. That's just not acceptable.
You shouldn't take any work on that you can't reasonably work on within the timeframes given, right?
Yeah.
I think solicitors are massively overworked. I think a load have left the industry. Obviously the government departments, etc., that they've got to interact with aren't exactly covering themselves in glory. So it is a tough job being a lawyer, but at the same time, we're in a service industry. Whether you're a lawyer, valuer, broker, lender, don't take something on that you can't stand behind and know that you won't be able to deliver. If you're going to say it's going to be done in a certain time, make sure that it is. And it's not rocket science, of course. Bar things that are outside of your control, you should be able to stick to that, and should, because at the end of the day, it's all about the client. That is the number one. And they're expecting something. You should be able to look in the whites of their eyes and say, I can give you this by this time because I've got a team behind me that have also agreed to stick to that time frame. And that's why I think certainly in the bridging market, you've got to be very careful who you use. Because, on Resi and Buy-to-Let, you've got a sourcing system and it's all much for a muchness. There's your favourites, but ultimately you're driven by rate as well as what the client needs or whether that can be delivered. But in bridging, there's so many lenders and so many. Well, there's a lot of shows. But that's, as brokers, you've got your collective favourites, the ones that when they say that they're going to say yes, they'll deliver it. No question, bar something that's completely left field outside of all of our control, so that you reputationally know that you're delivering for your client. When you say yes, you're saying yes on behalf of a third party who's always backed you and always done exactly what they say they will do. And then you've got your kind of second tier bridging lenders. Not that they're second tier in terms of what they do, but it might be you've used them a couple of times, not loads. They might be off the pace rate-wise or leverage-wise, but they're ultimately good. And it's more criteria-led. But I've tried using some lenders for the first time, some that I will never, ever use again. But you never know whether you're going to have that experience till you use them, right? But some that you're not, where have you been? And you give them a lot more business. But ultimately, irrespective of what industry you're in, or even in the types of property finance that we do, you need to stand by your word and what you're going to deliver and have the confidence that your counterparties and third parties that you work with can also do the same.
Yeah, I mean, to the extent that we were doing a transaction with a key partner broker, a broker key partner of ours. We've done a lot of business with them. We've got a couple of live transactions on with them at the moment, and we've got some more going ahead. And the reason we are doing that is in spite of service we got from one of our panel firms, again, kind of mandated to us by one of our funding lines. And this is an individual that infuriates me on a daily basis. But when I see their emails, where we're doing now granted, the client solicitor was dreadful on the transaction, right? And we won't get much sympathy from. Unfortunately, we won't get much sympathy from the broker for this, but it is what it is, right? I have to tell people internally, yes, it doesn't matter. They don't care that the client solicitor was shit. They just care about what we do and whether we delivered. But our solicitor was completely unhelpful. At one point, accused the client and their accountant of tax evasion. Now, if I told you the amount of tax they were evading, we're talking about 10 grand here. Okay, this for a client with a massive A&L, right? There's no way. All right, I just had to bat that one back. As soon as I saw that, I was like, this is utterly ludicrous. And then because of the extra work that the solicitor ended up incurring, They said, we need to increase our undertaking, basically double the fee. Like it was a 200 grand.
Which by which point you're kind of your hands are tied behind your back, right?
But we're talking like it's a 200 grand deal, and they tried to charge the client nearly 5 grand in fees. We had a very, very grown up conversation with them about that, But in the end, they sort of stuck to the guns partially, and there still had to be an increased fee. The way we got around that was we basically said, right, well, we as Avon will take that additional cost on the chin. So on this particular deal, we're going to end up essentially making no money, but it'll end up being a bit of a lost leader.
Well, it's goodwill to the parties that introduced, right?
But like I said, it's a deal that happened in spite of the solicitor, not because of them. They didn't help us out. Yeah. What do you think? What do you think is? What do you think is key when it comes to a client solicitor at the moment? Like, are you literally going to turn around to a client and go, if you use them, I'm not placing this case? Have you ever had to have that conversation?
There's been law firms that they've suggested using that I've suggested would not be a good way to go. And luckily, the clients that I deal with do listen to what I say, which is a good start. And I've had this conversation a lot with Scott Apps and Rob Syra at HTB. I've brought Scott's name up a couple of times there already, but I love those guys. It's sort of like you want the lender's lawyer to be amazing, but the borrower's lawyer is just as key, and arguably a bit more key than any other part, because you and I both know so many deals will usually die because of the borrower's solicitor. And it's all very well a lender having a great panel of lawyers. And whenever a good one comes along that a borrower's had, you're like, oh, we should get them on the lender's panel. No, don't. Because then our borrowers can't use. You always want a shadow panel of lawyers that your lender's got these great lawyers. I can recommend these great lawyers on the borrower's side. And guess what? The deal happens. It does it well. It goes through. Everyone's happy with the costs, apart from the client usually. Whatever the costs are going to be, they're never happy with it. But it is an expensive process. But having both lawyers working together in tandem, picking up the phone, crucially, not hiding behind emails, is key to getting transactions done, on time, and sometimes in advance of that target. Because ultimately, it's a very stressful industry to be in, and it's a very stressful process. Why make it more stressful? There's so many things you can do that don't need to be stressful, and that's communication.
It's quite interesting that you mentioned that sort of shadow panel. So in my activities as a commercial property investor, or with our family office, we use a firm called Jolson. I say they'll obviously be quite a well-known firm.
Yeah.
Jolson have historically done a little bit of specialist finance work for Avon many years ago, but they obviously do a lot for us as a family. They're very, very well-known, well-established real estate practice, and they were acting for a borrower not too long ago on one of our transactions, and I can say with confidence that it was one of the easiest transactions we've done in the last 3 years.
It's almost weird when that happens because it's so rare. They're like, well, this is what it could be.
Yeah.
This is what could be like on most transactions, but unfortunately, that's rarely the case.
I think one of the challenges of operating, when you're operating in a specialist finance space, when you're operating in that sort of sub £1 million kind of development space, is that sometimes very often the client will be trying to pinch pennies everywhere. And one of those areas that they pinch pennies, which is probably the worst place to pinch pennies, is is with the lawyers, right? Yeah. So, and unfortunately, the downside of that is that I've talked about it before, but the borrower solicitor gets the CPSE form from our lawyers. They see 30 odd pages of questions, most of which the answers are not applicable or no. But because they see that big thick document, they don't have the experience. They don't know. They're resi conveyancers, and they just go, "Yep, I'm not getting paid enough for this. Stick that to the bottom of the pile."
Ultimately, how much are you willing to pay for a good night's sleep?
Honestly, like you've got these clients who are making 250k a deal, and they're trying to save an extra 500 quid on their lawyers.
Yeah.
And then the lawyers are just making the financing process just horrendous.
And then it's everyone else's fault.
Yeah. Yeah, it's never their fault.
Yeah.
We're working on a case at the moment, and the client has bought a part of a shopping centre. I'm assuming it's like like sort of ancillary offices, with the intention of converting that into resi. Mm-hmm. It's a pretty good deal. The client's actually pretty decent as well. The underwriter's very keen to support it, but their solicitor's just useless. And they acquired this commercial. So it's part of a shopping centre. They completed the purchase before our financing came through. Fine, it's their prerogative. But their solicitor's so bad, didn't get a license for alteration in place, and knowing that the premises were going to be converted into residential. I mean, it has planning permission PD to be converted into residential. They didn't agree with the freeholder that the lease would allow residential as a permitted use. So you've done this. You're like, if as the new lessee, or tenant, effectively long let tenant of this accommodation with your superior landlord, you've already paid them the money. Your best point of leverage to negotiate something, the terms of your lease and the license to alter, were when you are actually in the process of the purchase, that conveyancing process. You're now trying to kind of shut the stable door after the horse is bolted to meet. I mean, this is basic stuff to make it mortgageable, but it's like if you're the client solicitor, why would you not have picked? But like, even if you're going to go in and do it ahead of time, why would you have done that? Why wouldn't you have done that then, rather than trying to fix it now? It just goes to show, like, the guy has no idea what he's doing, and of course, we look like idiots.
Yeah, we always ask the client to challenge their lawyer that they're about to instruct in terms of their experience, also their availability. How many times has a lawyer gone on holiday, not told anyone, and no one knows the file or the person looking after it? So you do need to challenge that aspect quite rigorously to make sure that we at least have a chance of making this happen.
Well, I think I agree with that. I do agree with that entirely. I think the difficulty sometimes is like a lot of our mutual clients, right? They'll just be like, "Well, I'm just a builder," right? And the idea of like standing up to their solicitor or challenging their solicitor, they're sort of well educated. I've been doing this for 40 years. How very dare you? I imagine a lot of clients will feel quite awkward about having that conversation. So it'd be interesting to see how some of those conversations go.
Well, that's when we always recommend lawyers. More often than not, they're happy to go with it. Sometimes they're not. If they're a lawyer that has been with that client for a long time, in that space, i.e. they're a developer, they've always been that lawyer, they should know what they're talking about if they've always acted for that client. Whether or not the other aspect is obviously speed, and communication with all parties is another matter. That's not something that you can necessarily predict.
Yeah. This podcast is sponsored by Avamore Capital. Avamore Capital is a development and bridging lender based in London, but lending all over England and Wales, lending on projects from £250,000 all the way up to £25 million on bridging, development, refurb and part complete developments. Please visit www.avamorecapital.com to find out more. Well,
who else now?
Who else now? Yeah. The funny thing is that the monitoring surveyors actually they get a bit of I'm actually going to give them a little bit of I'm going to give them a little bit of breathing space, because they're probably third on the list at the moment in terms of offenders in the professional category. We had I got a really nice message from Phil Mabb about 10 days ago. He had a very good. It turned out he ended up having a very good weekend. He on the back of his podcast episode, someone actually reached out to him. Ironically, actually, an Avamore client reached out to him to help them with a very challenging refi, which Phil successfully managed to place and got the. Basically, I think help the client stave off a receivership or buy a property out of a receivership, which was great. And I think that was off the back of him giving a couple of examples of some weird and wonderful transactions that he did. Of course, Phil had the reason Phil had an extra good weekend was that they completed that transaction, and then the next day his beloved Crystal Palace won the FA Cup. I think it was their first trophy in forever. So congratulations to them. And I know Jack Bristow as well, a big Palace fan. So I'm sure he was delighted about that, and a few others I've probably forgotten about. The reason I bring it up, Adam, you might be thinking, why is he talking about someone else? Were there any? Have you done any quirky or weird and wonderful deals over the last couple of years, or certainly since we last had you on the podcast, that not many other of your broker fraternity would have been able to place?
Well, funnily enough, the one that I took you out of, I thought had a lot of challenges.
Yeah.
Which was more private estate, I suppose you'd best class it, with multiple lenders, multiple titles, multiple types of property, which had to be split. And I think we played on the values of certain ones in terms of how lenders take valuations of certain types of assets to obviously get you guys made whole again. Yeah. Obviously, that's still ongoing, but we've got a solution for all of those. I've got one at the moment, which it's a gentleman buying a grade 2-star listed property with 25 acres, equestrian facilities, including like a sand school and things like that. 2 buy-to-lets on the property, and also land with planning to convert to 2 dwellings, 1 conversions. So the purchase price is 4 million. He's got about £500,000 to put in. So the way we're going to structure that is to split the resi onto normal resi. I say normal resi mortgage. There's not many lenders that will do adjacent land that you own, equestrian facilities, 25 acres, and all the rest of it, and grade 2-star listed. So we're going to split the buy-to-lets on separate titles. We can raise 100% finance on those bridging wise at 75% of the value. The lender's not bothered what you're buying it for as long as it's all above board, because we can play around with the values a bit on the site because of the way we're splitting it. And we can split out the barns, the ones with planning permission, and the lender will go off the residual value, not the purchase price. So again, we can play with the values or the purchase prices on that so that we minimize his personal mortgage, but also means we can finance the other bits 100%. So we've effectively got him 1.5 on the resi, 1.6. He's putting in 400-500 grand on a site worth 4 million, and he'll make a couple of million on the development itself.
Is that basically because the nature of the asset? It should have, if you're doing, let's call it an orderly exit of that asset, you would have, the breakup value would effectively have been a lot more than the value as it's being transferred at
Correct.
the moment. Yeah. Okay. So that'll turn out to be quite a good trade for the client.
Amazing.
Right?
It's kind of leaning on that knowledge of how lenders, what valuation methods a lender will use, and also crucially whether they go off the purchase price or the value.
Yeah.
And just playing around with that a bit. So that's been quite an interesting one.
Are you?
And I love the quirky and challenging ones, and we're getting a bit of a reputation, a bit of a niche for getting lenders out of tricky situations.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, and certainly you're one of the first phone calls when we've got a client that needs a solution, shall we say, to kind of get us out of something, or where we feel like the borrower just needs a bit of help. You know, sometimes even the broker that brought them to us doesn't have the wherewithal, the skill set to do it, and so the client needs an alternative face. And yeah, so it's always been really helpful to have someone like yourself.
Well, I enjoy it, and obviously very thankful for the referrals, but I think as a brokerage that really sets us apart from most, because we do every type of property finance, so that we understand how lenders approach every single type of property finance, rather than a brokerage that either does resi and buy-to-let or bridging development commercial. And you've got some that, they do both, but they've only just kind of started dipping their toe in one side. We've always done it. We've always done that. David's got 20 years experience. I've got 18, and we've always done both. So we've got great relationships with a lot of lenders, and we know how to play the game. We know what lenders look for, how they assess it, how they look at deals, and that's where we can really add value to clients and lenders alike.
Yeah, no, I think that's really great. What do you think? What are you looking ahead for the rest of 2025 and into next year? How are you seeing the market playing out? In both in terms of the resi market, the development market, and even say the commercial market as well.
Well, look, rates are going the right way. I think the recent inflation data. No, the recent inflation data has obviously put a bit of a kibosh, or at least a delay on that. The swap markets are still quite volatile, so 1 week rates are going up, then they're going down. But ultimately, base rate's still at a good level of where it was to make more deals viable.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a lot more people with businesses wanting to buy their own premises. A lot more people who are put off with buy-to-let going into the commercial investment space. Semi-commercial is a great way to enter that, because obviously you know how a buy-to-let works, but then it's got commercial. Well, that's a great entry into that sector.
So like shops with uppers, basically.
Yeah. And even then, there's great ways of playing to the way people value. So, for example, we recently did a semi-commercial where it was an elderly vendor. They didn't really want to get involved with renewing leases for the commercial tenants, so they were on rolling leases. Now, with anything in commercial, the length of the lease is quite important. And if they're rolling, you might find a lender that goes off vacant possession value, maybe, but it's not going to float. Most of it's not going to set the world alight in terms of appetite. But with the buy-to-lets, the uppers, they had a lot of refurb that needed to be done. So we managed to get that on a bridging loan. It was a below market value purchase because they wanted speed. So we managed to get quite high gearing on that. We got the cost of works thrown in, so they were able to refurbish the flats. They put the commercial tenants onto longer leases, and we had a lender that would go off the market value of those leases as opposed to the vacant possession value. And that meant we could remortgage the entire lot, not just to get all of their money back, but money on top, so that they could rinse and repeat, basically.
Wow, that sounds like a good investment strategy.
It is if you can find stuff like that, and they are very rare. I mean, I'm saying it flippantly, like it was something that was quite easy to do, but those guys work extremely hard in finding those opportunities.
Do you think that that's going to be that type of strategy is going to be an increasingly prevalent strategy for those private investors, like you say. So you think that rather than going down the straight resi AST route, that people are actually going to go, right, actually, because I want that extra bit of yield, I'm willing to dip my toe in the water. Probably we've seen, commercial prices, particularly for, say, what I would call high road retail, is sort of bottomed out and it's probably not going to get any worse because the internet, the internet can't really swallow up a nail bar or a corner shop or whatever, right? Or a hair salon. Do you think that that's where actually especially, and maybe the higher interest rate environment is also forcing investors to go to chase a little bit more yield and take that little bit extra risk?
Yeah, but look, commercial's still very expensive. It's bar bridging, it is the most expensive part of the market on the investment side, not the owner occupied side.
What are you typically seeing? Are we
7
talking,
and 8s?
Yeah, I mean, I guess 3.5 over base, isn't it? That's kind of my rule of thumb.
But as a long-term income play, and also don't forget, there's people that buy properties like this where there's probably space out the back or room for doing some airspace development or changing it into an HMO or whatever. There's always an angle to it. But I don't, there's a lot of very well-seasoned investors who have only done buy-to-lets, for instance, that have no idea that all these opportunities exist. So you do need to talk to brokers who understand that space so that they can highlight the opportunities for them to look out for, because we're not the ones going out with pots of cash to try and find these properties. But at least if we explain the opportunity that's there, they can potentially find more. Yeah.
Effectively, what you're saying to them gives them an opportunity to unlock deals that maybe that otherwise would be stuck or locked, right? So, and I guess it's a bit different to how it was 4 or 5 years ago, where the yields on all of those on those assets were really tight. Now, now there's a bit more logic to them, isn't there? So, and what's your views sort of on house prices more generally? Are you feeling like they're going to be fairly flat, or you think that there's, with a lack of supply coming through, despite Angela Rayner's best efforts, do you think that there's going to be, we're going to start to see a bit of house price inflation creep back in maybe over the next 12 months?
I kind of steer clear of predictions on that, because from my point of view, it is what it is. And it's out of my control. Again, it's down to the valuers or the AVMs if you're lucky to get that. So yeah, it's very much, it is what it is. What I think it will still remain a bit flat. The market's definitely more buoyant, so that might push things up a little bit. But it's a wait and see. In this day and age, in this climate, with our cousins across the pond and who's leading them and all the things going on in Europe, who the hell knows? No,
it's always a difficult one, isn't it? Are you doing much more, a lot more in the HMO space than you were?
A lot more.
A couple of years ago. Yeah,
mainly on people converting to HMO, and then us doing the refinance onto term debt. But there's a lot more people open to that, and that again, that's become a more sophisticated and professional area. And there's some great products that some of these developers are churning out the other side, and it's a good thing to have in your portfolio if you just do property.
Yeah, it's definitely something that we're seeing increasingly. It's a lot of and it definitely further north as well. I'd say that the themes around the sort of refurb and conversion. It used to be the case that, especially like we would be very London centric, and it would be the refurb conversion, and it's going to be let on ASTs, and then it'll be refied, and you can make that work in a near zero interest rate environment. But when your buy to let rates are 5 or 6%,
so you need those yields. You
need that yield.
And another example of asset class is holiday lets. They tend to get much better borrowing because of the way certain lenders will estimate apply the stress test, low, medium and high average weekly figure over 30 weeks, always going to beat the AST. And if they're not beating the AST, don't do it as a holiday.
I mean, that's certainly from our perspective, I think that holiday let is the one area where I think we still struggle a little bit in terms of our appetite, our credit appetite. I feel like we've really embraced HMO. So HMO, multiple occupancy, whatever you want to call it. Obviously, we'll do student as well, student conversions. We actually closed a student deal yesterday, development deal in Lancaster. So, like northern, further north and multiple occupancy, definitely something we want to do. Holiday lets, I think we just, I still think our credit mindset is still a little bit too focused on that, owner occupier.
But as a lender, you can sometimes spread yourself too thin in terms of what you lend on, and that's not a bad thing in terms of just staying in your lane on what you know about.
Yeah. If
you're starting to lend in areas you don't know about, that's where you're going to have problems.
I think that's right. I think also it helps as a sort of medium-sized specialist lender. It's probably better that we give you, the broker, more clarity as to what we will and won't do, because if you have that clarity, you're more likely to place the right cases with us, and those cases that you do place with us are more likely to be successful and proceed. Yeah. Whereas I think the mistake a lot of lenders make, especially when they get started, is they try to be too many things to too many people, and they end up being kind of nothing to no one. Yeah. So, no, I completely agree with that.
Who would you say is your favourite other lender in the market, apart from obviously Avon? Who do you have the best respect for?
That is a really, really interesting question. I would say I have a very grudging respect for Together.
Okay.
You probably weren't expecting me to say that, were you?
I wasn't, no.
No. And I'll tell you why. But that's not really my.
Not that there's anything wrong with Together.
Obviously, Together get. Look at the end of the day, they are the biggest specialist lender in the country. The business that Henry has built is remarkable, and if I could build something that is. It's
a hell of a business.
Yeah, I wouldn't say a tenth as big, because we are, I suppose we're not actually that far off that. But if I could build something that's a quarter as big or half as big in the next 10 years, I'd be absolutely delighted. So you've got to have a lot of respect for them.
Yeah,
they are just unbelievable operators. I'll tell you who. So I refer a lot of business to John Salisbury at Ortus, because so typically I'll get a commercial inquiry. It'll be an operating business. Mm-hmm. We're not great at commercial, and they just operating businesses like pubs and restaurants and all that kind of stuff. Just they're very good at that.
It's their niche.
So I like John a lot. I respect him a lot. Yeah, he actually messaged me last week because I gave him another referral, and he said, "I'm really sorry. I feel embarrassed that I'm not able to send much back in the opposite direction." And I said, "Can I buy you lunch?" I said, "Yeah, well, okay, well, we'll sort something out." So yeah, I do like them, and I do respect them a lot. So yeah, I've definitely got plenty of time for them. I suppose what I'd call a larger competitor in terms of the ticket sizes they do. Obviously, I've had him on the podcast, Chris Gardner, Atelier. Yeah. Great business. Great business. They now have Robert Orr, kind of what I would call one of my mentors in the industry, as an NED. So I think further strengthening them as an organisation, and so I definitely have a lot of time and a lot of respect for them as well. I mean, I could probably go on, but I think that they're, it's nice to be a little controversial maybe with the first example, but I think frankly there's, I have respect for pretty much anyone who's been able to sustain a specialist lending business for 5 or more years, that can be profitable, that doesn't have too many losses, that provides good levels of customer service. Actually, I will give another shout out to Mike Strange at Fundings 365. again, I mean, we compete with them from time to time on bits and bobs, but at the end of the day, they probably serve a slightly safer credit profile than we do, and so we don't compete probably that much. But I've known him for quite a long time now, and every time I see him, we end up at parties and things like that. We end up spending most of the evening talking to each other and no one else. Yeah. So again, a lot of respect for them. But yeah, like I said, anyone who can keep going for 5 years, that can not lose too much money, that can give good client outcomes, I'm here. I have a lot of time for. Yeah, for sure.
Who do you look up to in the industry?
Right. Well, I guess I mentioned Robert Orr, who was the founder of Titlestone and then became MD of Paragon after they were acquired. So I'd say Robert is definitely probably one of the first people to say. I have a lot of time for Chris at Tellier. I like him. I like him a lot. Maybe more mentioned John Ortis. I have a lot of respect for Josh and Tamer at MC Finance. Again, like, don't have a close relationship with them at all, but I've always respected them, admired them from afar. Don't really compete. Not an organisation that we compete with particularly. Who else would I say? I think on the broker side, obviously yourself. I've obviously will dip into that well. A lot of respect for Rob Jupp, what he's achieved. Titan. He's an industry titan, both figuratively and physically. Yeah. Phil Gray as well at Watts. Andrew Ark and co. Again, a lot of respect for him, a lot of admiration for him.
Great guy. Yeah.
And Ed as well, Ed at Ark. And look, I'm going to offend lots of people because there's too many to mention. We do a lot of business with Oriam Dean Brown. He's and I know his family has been through a lot recently. But he's built a very strong business there. Like I said, I'm going to probably offend lots of people. I offend a lot of people in the process.
Oscars, but where you're asked to list the people that made it happen. But
yeah, I think obviously I have a very strong respect and admiration for Zaher, my co-founder. We have a sort of 10 years in, still have a good working relationship. It's definitely been through ups and downs, and we've been challenged a lot on the way. But yeah, it's definitely. Yeah,
I think 10 years in with a business partner says a lot, and as you say, there's always ups and downs. There's things you're not always going to agree with. Yeah. But ultimately, you're on that ride together, right?
Yeah. And
there's no one else that understands that other than your business partner.
No. And it's a funny one because it's not like we're like best mates. Outside of work, and we're calling each other up every on the weekend going, do you see this? Do you see this? Like, we definitely give each other space, outside of work. But I think, if one of us is on holiday, eventually we get that, you get that kind of withdrawal.
Well, DT's on holiday at the moment, still getting bloody voice notes.
Yeah.
But no, our relationship was born out of, working together at the same brokerage that Andrew Robinson was at. Which was a great place to start. But, it was a friendship after we left. And that's why we've kind of come back full circle to start Helix 3.5 years ago. And it was weird because whenever we see each other, we just talk about business. And last year it was my 40th and we went away for the weekend with our families. And I remember we spent an afternoon together, just me and him. We didn't talk about business once. And it was like, okay, I remember this is a friendship as well.
Yeah.
Because you do spend so much time on the business, in the business, talking about business that you almost forget all the other bits.
Well, I think that's quite nice. And, our former business partners and co-founders, Amit and Nick, obviously they left us 4 years ago now to go and set up their own lending business. And for a while that was painful. It was like the closest thing I've had to sort of a heartbreak for, since I was a spotty teenager, I suppose. And I think what's really nice is that, but Nick is godfather to one of my kids. Amit and I, like, the idea that we wouldn't remain friends forever was unimaginable, because we just get on so well. We had so many shared interests, and we see the world in such a similar way. So when we sort of reconciled, sort of 12, 18 months after they left, it's been really nice that we've been able to, we now go and have dinner together once a quarter or something like that. And so it's really nice to recommence that friendship. You asked me about people I look up to in the industry. Who else would you say you look up to on you mentioned Scott at HTB a lot, but who else
Scott and Rob, Alex Upton as well, Adrian Maloney at OSB, known Adrian a very long time, Andrew Robinson, Josh and Tamer and Gareth at MT. There's lots that I'm now scrambling trying to think of. But
I'll put you on the spot.
But it's a wonderful industry to be in if you need help or support on any level.
Yeah.
And there's lots that have shared the trials and tribulations of being in this industry. Which is it's weird. Someone said, the other day, how did you end up in this? And no one ends up being no one aspires to be a mortgage broker. Everyone sort of ends up in this industry in one way or another. But it's a great place to be in. It's a lot of excitement. It's a lot of heartache, but there's some wonderful moments and opportunities as well.
Yeah.
To experience things you otherwise wouldn't do.
We you actually came up with a lot of questions for Martin Stewart, didn't you?
Oh, yes, Martin. He's obviously
I should have
mentioned, and I'll give a plug to his book, Goodbye Morecambe, buy it in good bookshops and on Amazon. He's a hell of a character. It was
great fun. It was a great fun recording the couple of episodes.
Podcast.
Yeah,
but he shoots from the hip. He doesn't suffer fools, and he says it how it is. And I think that's quite rare. And he's a very unique individual in our industry. Definitely look up to the guy.
Do you agree with his assertion that mortgage brokerages don't have value? Because I think that, when we are seeing, using Phil Gray as an example, Andrew Montlake recently as well, Corico, we've had a couple of, consolidations, M&A. I think, I definitely think we're going to see, and I feel like I'm a broken record on this, but people need to bear with me. I'd had a friend of mine who is working currently as a consultant in specialist finance space. We had a coffee, and she said, wanted some gossip on which lending businesses might be up for sale. I think we're definitely going to see it in the lending space. Do you agree? Do you agree with this assertion that mortgage brokerages don't have any intrinsic value?
So David and I have this conversation a lot. He doesn't ultimately feel that there is. I'm of a different mindset in terms of ultimately you can't tie in clients to use you all the time, but then neither could an estate agency, and they get sold and bought. We rely on our brand a lot, which I feel is getting more traction and people know us a bit more. But it's the expertise within that. Now, we're slightly different in terms of an industry where we rely on a lot more self-employed brokers than other industries. So arguably, if you're buying a business where the clients and what the business that's done within that business is the value, and you've got self-employed brokers who just say, I don't like the new regime, I'm off. Well, those clients are going to follow them. You can't own clients. and they will follow the person that they look after them. So it's a really tough one, because ultimately there has to be a value. You can't have a business that has no value. Obviously, as long as it's profitable and not in litigation or insolvency. But to say there's no value, I don't. It's a moving dial. That being said, there's integrations into businesses that would be of value if you are, say, an accountancy firm where you as a business have your own clients, that there's a synergy there for integration. But another brokerage buying another brokerage, I don't see that as much. But then if you look at who was it? It was Howden's.
Yeah, well, that was SPF, right? Howden's bought SPF.
SPF, and who was the other one? Nick Neofitu's
Mantra.
That's the one. So that's another example. That was quite a big one, wasn't it? So it does happen.
That was an accountancy buying.
There you go. So I think if there's integration with a separate client bank that mortgage brokerage hasn't tapped into, you're buying a skill set, and that has value.
I guess the way I look at it is, I think if I was a Mr. Rich man with £1 million or 2 million quid or whatever the number is, right, and I just wanted to go and buy a business to provide me with the residual income, buying a mortgage brokerage probably wouldn't be the.
No, because you've got those self-employed brokers who's like, all right, I'm off, and you can't tie them in. But
on the other hand, the mortgage brokerage has value as a lead, as a sales funnel, a two-way sales funnel for a business, like you said, for a business like an accountancy business, for an insurance brokerage, right? Insurance brokerages which have incredibly good, incredibly high values, right, in terms of multiples. That there's obviously great synergy there between those two types of businesses, probably, and wealth management and so on and so forth. I think that so that's why I think there is value to mortgage brokerages, because I think you have access to so many clients and so many people and so many relationships, and I think that those relationships are intrinsically undervalued relative to the businesses that a mortgage brokerage could be bolted onto. So I think it's an interesting space. I think it's an interesting time.
Look, we'll definitely see some consolidations, but what those values look like, who knows?
Yeah.
But yeah, going back, I've just thought of 3 people that I should absolutely mention.
Go on.
On our regulated business, we're an appointed representative of a directly authorised business called City Mortgage Solutions. And there's 3 wonderful guys there, directors, Paul Clark, Gary Gravilovic, and Gary Cox. And they've definitely been mentors to us as a business, because we're effectively a network of one. And they've been in the industry, 30 odd years, maybe. I think one of them a bit more, Clarky. But they've been wonderful to us in terms of guiding us to build our business, and really lean on them for support.
Nice.
And I wanted to make a point of mentioning them, because we do owe a lot to them.
Right. Okay. Well, they've had a good shout out now, so hopefully like and share. They can like and share the episode. Obviously, it's a slightly different format conversation today, but we're obviously kind of getting to the point where we need to wind down. But any last kind of any sort of closing remarks from you in terms of how what you're excited about for the next 12 to 18 months? Where you see things going? There's
a lot more positivity and energy in the industry. I think if you're a broker, learn more about the other types of property finance. If you're ever interested in a conversation about Helix and what we do, whether you're a client, a borrower, or another broker, we'd love to speak to you. It's a wonderful, wonderful industry to be in, and I just embrace all the opportunities that go with it.
Love it. Adam, where can people find you on the internet?
LinkedIn is probably the best place. Adam Stiles, Stiles.
And a link to the website, the Helix website.
It's Helix FP for financialpartners.co.uk, or Helix SF for structuredfinance.co.uk. So helixfp.co.uk and helixsf.co.uk.
And you can find me on the internet, property_funder, on all your favourite social platforms. The podcast also has its own socials as well. I think that's all we've got time for. Adam,
thank you so much for having me on again. I've loved it.
Oh, well, it's been great having you
I'll
on
see
as
you
well.
in another 3 years.
We'll try and make you come back on sooner. Well, maybe with one of your mentors.
That's a great idea. Great idea.
Yeah, so you can go and sit and have a fanboy moment live on camera. All right, thank you. Thanks everyone, and we'll talk to you again on the next one. Cheers. Bye bye.